We're here to talk about power, politics, and influence. Not that kind of politics. We're not talking about what's going on in the world. It's more about the politics that happen in the organizations where we work.
Sometimes politics is having the courage to make a decision that may be unpopular.
There are some executives, there's some leaders, there's some companies that like to say, we don't have politics in our culture. We are not political. But humans are political animals.
So politics is really about smelling the room. There are power players in a room. There are quiet people in a room. Those are probably the strongest ones in the room, by the way. People who don't need to have their face in the frame, people who don't need their voice broadcast are probably the real power players in the room. It's not who you think it is.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Leadership and Motivation Unleashed. So we are here with another topic on questions executives secretly ask but rarely say out loud. We have to figure out a catchier name for that. But
I
we're
like
here
it.
to, do you like it? Okay.
Yeah.
So we're here to talk about power, politics, and influence. Not that kind of politics. We're not talking about what's going on in the world. That's not for this podcast. There's many other podcasts you can listen to learn more about that.
Mhm.
But it's more about the politics that happen in the organizations where we work. Now, there are some executives, there's some leaders, there's some companies that like to say, we don't have politics in our culture. We are not political. But humans are political
Yeah.
animals. And when you get people together, there's just stuff that happens because we all bring our baggage and our history and our emotions and our talents, but also some of, unfortunately, our worst qualities. There are people that are gossips, and there are people that are manipulative, and there are people that try and socially engineer things, and it all happens in the workplace. So, but people don't really like to talk about it because we pretend that they're not there, but they do affect us. So, Patrick, what do you think about this? How much of leadership success is actually political dynamics? How do we navigate this without entering the fray if we don't like it? How do we confront it?
Yeah, I change hats. So if you guys are back-to-back episodes with us, I had my Yankee hat on because Aaron Judge starts tonight for Team USA, and I'm a big Yankees fan, baseball guy. So, but I switch hats to the Columbia Bank hat. If you want to gauge success of a company is based on how your customers treat you, not how you treat your customers. And I was invited to a NASCAR race in Austin, Texas last weekend by Columbia Bank that recently acquired Pacific Premier Bank, who's a top 10 customer of ours here at Chuck Alt. And I was honored that they'd ask, and they sponsored the car for that race. So if you go watch any of the video of the race in Austin at the road course, you'll see the Columbia Bank car. But it came with some really unique access. And the access was we got to meet the team owner, and the team owner is Joe Gibbs. Now, if you're a football fan with any type of tenure behind you, Joe Gibbs was the coach of the Washington Redskins. I want to say late 70s to 91, two-time Super Bowl champion. He wears his Super Bowl rings when he goes to the track. He's always loved racing. So in 1991, he started Joe Gibbs Racing. And he had drivers, I want to say like Bobby Labonte and Kyle Busch. Like these are big NASCAR names. And what does a Super Bowl coach do? Well, shepherd really different types of human beings towards success. And we spent an hour with him. There were 6 of us in his hauler. It's a $1 million bus, if you want to call it that. All the NASCAR drivers have these really fancy buses with coach leather, and they're amazingly fancy. There's big money in race car driving. Anyway, Coach Gibbs' hauler is just a moving office. There's no bed in it. There's a restroom, but it's mostly a conference table with swivel chairs and a beverage and food area. It's where he hosts his sponsors. His sponsors are his customers. So the president of Columbia Bank, myself, and a couple of the president of Columbia Bank staff were sitting with Coach Gibbs, and he's 85 years old, still has the energy of like a 40-year-old. It was so impressive to be around. And the listeners and even Rachel are like, what the hell does this have to do with politics in the office? Well, if you think about a football team, those are really high paid people. And there's varying degrees of pay. I mean, if you move away from when he was a coach to today, these guys make $100 million to play a game. And you could have disparaging hierarchy on a team. Like your quarterback could make $100 million and your kicker makes 400,000. And you got to find a way to blend those people together to be one, to go into modern Roman Colosseum combat and kill each other on a football field for 60 minutes to win championships and make your owners money. Even football teams have sponsors. Look at Minneapolis or the Minnesota Vikings, US Bank Stadium. If you're an NBA fan, Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee for the Milwaukee Bucks. Like, these companies don't write these checks to have their name in a building to back a loser. So these teams are under a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of politics in it. So a lot of these owners are billionaires. The general managers or the team presidents are multi-millionaires. The coaches are multi-millionaires. The quarterbacks probably make more money than most of the staff on the team. And then you got to find a way to blend that together, cutting through arrogance and ego. And then think about the age of these guys. They're 20 years old to 28 years old. They're still forming as adults. And you have to shape them into a cohesive unit. And it's like Coach Gibbs called it like catching lightning in a bottle. It's so hard to win a championship. It's so hard to win anything. And the number one thing he faced in his career was team dynamic. You could call it politics, but the kicker who made 400,000 and the quarterback makes 100 million, they coexist in the same locker room. Project forward to NASCAR. I had actually met Coach Gibbs before. No one at Columbia Bank knew that. My son, I've shared his special needs. He's autistic. We went to a NASCAR race in 2012, and Joe Gibbs driver Kyle Busch won that race. And my son and I were invited upstairs to the champions toast. And that's where the winner of the race sits with or stands with like 60 people that are in this small, intimate setting, and everyone gets a glass of champagne and you toast the winner of the race. Well, Coach Gibbs sat at the table next to the table I was at, of the people who invited me to the race and my son and to this event. And my son would not stop looking at Coach Gibbs. And he was 10 at the time, I think. And you never know with autistic kids. They go left, they go right, do they go straight? They're a bundle of energy. He jumped out of his chair and ran right to Coach Gibbs in the middle of the driver's toast and jumped in his lap. So I have pictures of my son, who was 10 at the time, sitting in Coach Joe Gibbs' lap. Fast forward to last Sunday, I told that story to Coach Gibbs. I'm like, Coach Gibbs, I want to thank you because he sat in your lap the whole toast. He sat with my son for like 30 minutes. My
Did
son
he
would,
remember it?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
And his handler, I call him his handler, chief of staff, has been with him since 91. He remembered before Coach Gibbs remembered. But when I showed him the picture, he was like, oh, yeah. So in that moment in NASCAR, he jumped to a Kyle Busch story. Now, I doubt Kyle Busch will ever listen to this podcast, but if he does, Mr. Busch, I apologize for sharing this story that your team owner shares. And Kyle Busch no longer drives for Gibbs Racing, but he was like, boy, Kyle Busch, he was a handful. And that's the beauty about guys, team owners like that have all this amazing stories and history. They're great storytellers. But he was like, Patrick, I got to tell you this story. I remember that race. Before that race, Kyle Busch came after me saying that I was giving my other cars better technology, better crew chiefs, better pit crews, and blaming me for him not winning. And it was not a good sight. And he was like, I was younger then. Everyone thinks I'm like this gentle guy. But I was aggressive. And of course he was. Think about what he did for a living his whole life, right? He goes, so we got into it. He goes, why would I give the other teams better stuff? Like the crew chiefs would quit. That means I don't favor my players. I don't favor my drivers. Everyone is on an equal playing field. There is no favorites here. And then 3 days later, he goes out and wins the race. So they reconnected after the temperatures calmed and everyone forgave each other for getting chippy with each other. And Coach was like, sometimes you just better keep your mouth shut. And Kyle Busch from there on kind of did. I mean, he was always a fiery driver, but that's a version of managing really big egos. There's a lot of money on the line. You know, Kyle Busch smelled the room. Coach Gibbs, if you knew anything about him, he was known as one of the most fair coaches in the National Football League. Everybody got a shot. The first Super Bowl winning quarterback that was African-American, Doug Williams, who was one of my favorite quarterbacks growing up, played for Coach Gibbs. Coach Gibbs gave him a shot. And that, I want to say, it was 1985. And I'm pretty sure Doug Williams won the MVP that year. Super Bowl MVP, first African American quarterback to win the championship under Coach Gibbs' leadership. There was all kinds of unspoken pressure, even in the 80s, about the optics of that and the league's behavior and blah, blah, blah. And there's Coach Gibbs. I don't give a crap what you think of me. This guy's good. A quick side note about Doug Williams. I want to tell this story. So, Coach told the story in his holler when I brought up Doug Williams' name that he was so calm. Like he brought a calm to the locker room. Apparently, Joe Theismann, who he also won a Super Bowl with, was very energetic. I'll leave it at that. Doug Williams is very calm. And he remembers in that Super Bowl, there was a pivotal moment where he had to make a pretty important decision, the coach, about what play to run. It was a big deal. And Doug Williams comes over to the sideline. And Coach Gibbs was like, my life was passing before my eyes. He walks up yawning in the middle of the Super Bowl. He was like, it was the biggest yawn I've ever seen anyone do. We're on national television. The game's on the line. I'm trying to figure out what play to call. And this guy looks like he's about to fall asleep. But it brought this incredible calm to me. We agreed on a play. He went in and executed it, and they won the Super Bowl. So politics isn't just like saying the right thing, wearing the right thing, and my friends are associated with the right people. Sometimes politics is having the courage to make a decision that may be unpopular and screwing the politics. Starting Doug Williams in 1985 over whoever else he could have put in the games. Kyle Busch's behavior before the Texas race that my son jumped in Joe Gibbs' lap, which is a weird intersection. How did Coach Gibbs allowing Kyle Busch some grace to lose his shit on the team owner, which is like, would be like me yelling at Richard Davis or you yelling at the CEO of AT&T. Like, who does that? Like, that's your boss. What are you doing yelling at? I mean, you're accusing him of playing favorites against you. And then the universe spoke and gave Kyle Busch a win, his first win at Texas. So politics is really about smelling the room. There are power players in a room. There are quiet people in a room. Those are probably the strongest ones in the room, by the way. People who don't need to have their face in the frame, people who don't need their voice broadcast are probably the real power players in the room. It's not who you think it is. Last story on this topic. So my first meeting, big shot meeting at Fiserv, there was a really big problem at the company. There were many problems at the company, but this was a really big problem. And I had just been acquired from US Bank. I didn't know anybody. And then boom, 8 months later, they announced the acquisition of First Data. And the CEO coming in from First Data knew of this problem and wanted to talk to the guy that they asked to fix it, which was me. So they flew me to New York. I don't think I've even told you this story, Rachel. It's actually a wild one, and there's lessons for everybody listening in it. So I'm nervous. I'm like, wow, I just met this Fiserv leadership team in Milwaukee. Now I'm going to New York a couple months later to meet this First Data leadership team. I didn't know the politics going on between Fiserv senior leadership and First Data senior leadership, and there was a plenty. And by the way, there's politics in every acquisition because people at every level, because you're in your mind, you're like, I got to fight for my position. Oh no, there's another Patrick Law over there. I need to be smarter than that guy so I can get to keep my job. All the stuff that happens in mergers and acquisitions. But I was so focused on the mission at hand in 2018 and 19. I smelled it in the room, but I didn't understand it yet. I did a couple years later. So I get to New York, wake up at the crack of dawn here. I go to 225 Liberty was the address down on Wall Street where the First Data offices were. And it's a beautiful setup, like massive screens, and they had NASCAR hoods because First Data sponsored NASCARs. And it was like walking into a museum of payments. And, First Data is a big deal, largest merchant processor on the planet. I'm going to meet their CEO and his team with this problem that Fiserv was having. Well, the meeting was supposed to be at like 10:30, and fast forward, it didn't happen until 9 p.m. that night. So I sat there all day, and the executives were in a walled off area of glass. And me being me, I just checked in with the CEO's admin and said, hey, I'm going to go sit in the conference room. And she goes, you're not allowed to sit there. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? No one's using the room. I mean, or is there another room I could sit in? And she was like, no, you're not an executive. You can't be here. I've logged you and we'll come get you when we're ready. I'm like, well, can I have a badge to use the restroom? Is there a place for me to sit? No. I'll walk you over here and I'll show you where the coffee station is. So I'm sitting in like the cube area away from the executives area. I'm dehydrated. Like there's that little white cups for water out of the sink. If I needed to use the restroom, I had to tap, I had to interrupt people who probably wonder who the hell is this guy for their badge. Can I please go use the restroom? So I sat there for almost 8 hours, 9 hours. My wife was saying, Patrick, walk out, quit. No one should be treated that way. Now, people are like, wow, he's telling us this is a crazy story. It's a version of politics. I didn't have the right rank. I wasn't allowed to sit in the shiny side of their building. And my wife, who I told this story to, because I'm upset, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm upset because I had a 5 o'clock flight home. I was only going up for the day. I have a job to do. I didn't come up to be treated like this. She's like, Patrick, just walk out. And that's my wife, for everybody to know. Like, if she sees me being treated like that, she's like, screw them, quit. You get a job anywhere. It's good having that kind of support, but I also have to think through that a little bit. But I didn't quit. And I stayed there. The meeting finally started to happen. And there was like 12 people in the room. It's 7, 8 o'clock at night, guys. Think about what I'm saying. Think about what the culture was at First Data. Think about that was probably the norm. I'd not experienced that before. I'd never worked for people who made people hang out for a day waiting for a meeting to start. We're in the room and there's one person not sitting at the table. It was like for people who ever watched Die Hard 2, when Bruce Willis gets in the van and there's a guy in the back with sunglasses on that didn't talk. It's always the CIA guy or the Mossad guy that is the power player, but he doesn't speak. Well, there's a guy against the wall who didn't talk the whole meeting. And he was very young looking, like crazy young. And all these older, they were EVPs and vice chairman, all these fancy titles First Data had. Meeting started. It only lasted 7 minutes, by the way. The CEO and I hit it off. He remembered my name from US Bank and the veteran program I helped start there. He takes me out of the room. He goes, Patrick, come to my office. I want to show you all my challenge coins. He must have had 100, 200 challenge coins because he's very military oriented. So it was just me and him in his office looking at all his stuff. I keep looking over my shoulder and all the people in the glass conference room were just watching the two of us in his office. We come back. We have a 5-minute conversation about the problem. The version of me from First Date is on camera in Omaha, Nebraska. The CEO says, I like this guy. He's going to run it all now. And he says to the guy on the screen, turn your teams over to him tomorrow. And the meeting ended. The guy against the wall who didn't talk said, Patrick, stay behind. Everyone got up and left for a 7-minute meeting, 5 of which I was with him by myself in his office, Rachel and listeners. Think about it. The optics of that. After all day, they still haven't offered me water. I'm parched in the conference room. There's nothing. I sit down with the quiet guy and he's like, Patrick, you got to get better at being horizontal, not vertical. And I'm tired. I'm dehydrated. I'm a little angry. I sat there for a 7-minute meeting. This guy ended up being my boss. I'll say his name, Himanshu Patel. And that's where I really learned that there's power in silence. And he was the most powerful one in the room. I didn't know he was the CFO of First Data. That's what he was at the time. I just thought he was this young-looking, quiet guy. One of the smartest people I've ever met. And I said, sir, I don't mean to be rude, but who are you? He's like, I'm Himanshu Patel. I'm the CFO of First Data, and I'm probably ended up running banking and at the new Fiserv, and I want you to be on my team. And I'm like, so was this a job interview? Was this some like weird political wrangling to see if you could make me miserable enough to walk out? I actually said that to him. He's like, no, that's just kind of what we do here. We'll get better about that. Nothing's ever on time. He goes, but when I mean horizontal versus vertical is, you got to learn to read the room better. You didn't do much research. I could tell you didn't know who was sitting there. A lot of your dialogue was you sounded annoyed. And you are broadcasting that. I'm like, well, I am annoyed. I've been sitting here for 9 hours and no one even offered me a bottle of water. And I had to beg strangers for their badge so I could go use the restroom. And he laughed. So anyway, this point of this story is whatever you think you're going through, whether it's a day of solitude in a weird office with no water and no badge to use the restroom, learn how to read the room and smell the air. That sounds a little graphic, but the dynamics in the room that evening They were as nervous and afraid of what the CEO was up to as I was. And they had been with him for a long time. But I let my own energy and emotion drown out the noise in the room. I just sat down at the table and didn't introduce myself to anybody. That is not a politically smart thing to do. And there's 12 people sitting there. It was the COO, it was the president, it was the CFO, it was all the C's inside First Data and a bunch of SVPs and EVPs. I just sat down and didn't say a word because I was pissed off. That is not smart politics. That is a word for that. And it wasn't a test. Even though I asked Himanshu, was it? No, it wasn't. I should have been walking around the room. I should have stayed on, not off. I turned myself off out of frustration. That is a politically unsavvy thing to do. Once my wife said, just leave, and I chose to stay because I'm mission oriented and nothing. I whine about a bunch of stuff, but I always stay on target. Once I made that decision, I should have got a hold of myself. And I should have walked in that room when they finally let me in their fancy area and put my best face on and shook everyone's hand and said, I'm Patrick Law. I didn't. I just sat down and looked at them. Now, a lot of people remember that. They're like, Patrick, we can't believe you made it out of there. That was kind of bold of you just to sit down and act like you own the room. I wasn't trying to own the room. I was tired and thirsty and agitated. So anyway, smell the air. Who are you working with? Try to stay on. That's not being political. It's being wise in the moment. Everyone calls everything political. It's almost overused. But there are some politics involved in your terms of your behavior, how you're interpreted, and if you can be trusted with important things. Now, my 5 minutes in his office talking about First Data called it salutes. First Data salutes. You actually know the lady who I think created that at First Data in Atlanta.
Was that Vivian?
Vivian.
Yeah.
I think she ran that program actually. And it was me and Eric Kidd and a couple of other people at US Bank that ran Proud to Serve. And First Data and US Bank were always neck and neck for those what do they call it? BCP, not BCP. What are those?
ACP.
Thank you, programs.
Yeah.
That's where he heard my name.
Mhm.
In his office, I was on. In the broader room, I was off. Everyone needs to hear that and really think about it. And I didn't do it because it was the CEO. I did it because he changed the frame. He changed the frame.
Well, he put you in a situation where you were comfortable because you had this shared passion and interest around the military, right? Same thing for somebody who bumps into an executive in the hallway and starts talking about football or golf or something, right?
So whether it's Coach Gibbs and his racing teams or Coach Gibbs and his football teams and quarterbacks yawning during the Super Bowl or drivers yelling at him that he's playing favorites or being left in a conference or not even in a conference room with no water for 9 hours, maintain discipline. That's not being political. That's being the steady one in the room. And think about that. That wasn't that long ago. I'd already had 20 years of my career. And even though it was an extreme story about not having water and asking strangers for a badge so I could leave and use the restroom, I should have maintained a little bit more decorum. I wasn't rude and throwing out words and all that. I wasn't on. To your point, the CEO put me in an environment that I was comfortable in, so I was back on. But that you have to read the room to know I should have worked that room. In the 15 minutes we all sat there waiting for the CEO to walk in, I didn't say a word, and that was not politically smart. So I'm giving you a negative version of the story, plus some Joe Gibbs love, to say to everybody, you don't know you're being a political animal, even though you are. The human dynamics of a corporate environment, a new military unit, a police department, a not-for-profit have to be paid attention to. It isn't something that you can brush off and don't think is important. It doesn't mean you're politicking for advantage. I always considered it, you're navigating how people see you and what version of yourself do you want to be seen. The last pod we talked about bringing your authentic self to work. Was me sitting there silently frustrated after being in a strange building for 8 hours with no support? Was that the right thing to broadcast to a bunch of people who just merged with the company that just bought me? Think about the dynamics of that. I was acquired, then they were acquired 8 months later. They had been working together silently all that time, by the way. I wasn't aware. And the Fiserv people said, "Oh, Patrick Law, he's amazing. You're going to love him." And then I roll in the room and don't talk. But I didn't do any of that math. So these are hard things we do with each other, very hard things. And as sad as it does take a lot of emotional energy to be calculating enough. And don't take that as a negative. Being calculating isn't a negative. If you're going to navigate careers like this, particularly in modern times, and even from 2018 to 2026, it's a century away. Technology is changing by the minute, not by the month and year anymore. So you have to be able to navigate perceptions. You have to be able to show people without looking like a blowhard what you are, what your capabilities are, why you matter, why your brand helps their brand. As I wear my Columbia Bank hat from the racetrack, like this brand mattered to Joe Gibbs in a big way. You don't think Joe Gibbs was yucking it up with the president and CEO of Columbia Bank? He actually likes it, but he was doing it because he wants Columbia Bank to come back as a sponsor again and again and again. We're all selling something. Joe Gibbs in that hauler was politicking. Now, it's an ugly word nowadays. Politics is ugly and horrible, and we're all so divided. We should probably come up with another word for what we're talking about, Rachel. But what Joe Gibbs did, that CEO left that hauler on cloud 9. Joe Gibbs made him feel like he was the only bank CEO on the planet that mattered. And you know what? For that hour, he did. Joe Gibbs is a master leader. He leads his race teams, his football teams. He's a man of God. He leads his family through faith. He's a gentleman. He is what a lot of people would aspire to be. And when you're around him, you just feel better. Is that salesmanship? Is it politics? I don't know. But it matters to his business, and his business is race car driving. Just like it was for the Redskins. Do you think the Redskins wanted him out being anything other than what he was in the community? No. Redskins wanted sponsors. Redskins wanted fans. People still love Joe Gibbs. Or look up his football cards. His autographed football cards go for $500-$600 a piece. He's a legend. So anyway, be Joe Gibbs. Be the CEO that walked me to his office, and don't get mired in your own stuff. Always try to be on. It's going to help you from a career perspective. It's going to help you from a human being perspective. That was a lot.
That was. And I love those stories because it makes it real. Now, politics, as you said, it's a bad word. Everyone loves to hate politics. And some people love to hate politics so much that they ignore it or deny that it exists. But it's everywhere, right? I see the way I define politics at work, it's the multidimensional undertones of every interaction. And some of it is historical. Some of it is connected to a particular leader. Some of it is connected to the particular topic or event. Some of it you introduce without even realizing it.
Yeah.
But it's there, and you can deny it and you can hate it. And some of it is actually bad. Like some politics is when people gossip all the time, or when certain leaders show favoritism to other employees and ignore others, right? That is objectively bad. Some of that, if there's a cool kids club at work and you walk by and they stop talking, or there's a bunch of people who came from one acquisition and they're all joking around about stuff that happened in their glory days, and you're not part of that acquisition, and so you don't know what's going on. That can feel isolating. And those are some things that you can ignore, you can grumble about. But the politics that I think that are important to really think about and understand how to navigate are the undertones to that conversation. You know how across different cultures, there are some behaviors or some facial expressions or hand expressions that are considered offensive in some cultures, but not offensive in other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that mean something completely different. Like if you're in Israel and somebody does this, what does that mean to you? If you come over and I do this to you.
Pay attention.
Yeah. So actually it means just a minute. It's like just a minute.
Oh, see, I never would have.
Wait a minute. Right. And in other cultures, that might mean something.
I would have thought you were trying to get me to focus. Hey, be with me.
Yeah. So it's like just a minute.
No, that's not what that is.
Right. In every company, there's different things going on that you might not even know about. Like there's some executives, and Patrick, you and I have joked about this, that are very triggered by certain words. And so their team knows not to use that word or that term or that something around them, because then they go off into and so everyone twists themselves into a pretzel to call something a different word so that they don't set off a particular executive. There are some teams where something is going on that you might not know about, and you show up at a meeting and you're like, something's off and I don't know what's going on. And what I always encourage people to think about is, when you encounter that, you should take a step back and say, there is something happening that I don't know about, that somebody has not shared with me. There's more to this story than I can see with my bare naked eyes. I need to go and find out what's going on to see if it's something that should cause me to adjust my behavior. Maybe somebody's going through a really significant personal issue and everyone else knows about it and you don't. And you show up at that meeting and they, go off at you and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? And it's really not about you. It's about what's going on with them. Sometimes companies have very unique ways of communicating and collaborating. So I'll tell you a story. I won't share the name of the company because I don't want to disparage them, because they're really, really a great company.
Yeah.
But I once worked somewhere where there was this phenomenon that I did not know about. And so I was new. I was showing up in meetings, and my job was to introduce new ways of doing things. Like a really successful company, really successful hiring practices. And my job was to encourage them to completely renovate their hiring practices, to remove bias from the process, to reach talent that they weren't accessing on their own, to not make important business decisions with their emotions. And I'd show up with these strategies and these ideas. And very often these ideas would cost more money, take more time, get people out of their comfort zones. And for some people, I was trying to fix something that wasn't broken, because they weren't always bought in on what senior leadership thought. And so I'd come in and I'd share my ideas and I was really excited about it. And you know what everyone did? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. Sure, of course.
Oh
And I'd
no.
leave the meeting, think, oh, that's great. I did great. They really liked my ideas. And then I'd follow up and I would get like polite resistance, like, oh, yeah, I'm not available then, or oh, maybe next time, or oh, sure, but we need this and this person to approve that and that. And I was like, something is off. Like, they seemed really into it. And then when I try and actually get it done, I'm getting this resistance. And apparently there was this phenomenon at this company called the blank nod. So if the company was called Mickey Mouse, it would be the Mickey Mouse nod. And everyone's like, oh yeah, you're getting the Mickey Mouse nod. And I was like, what is that? They're like, well, that's when everyone seems like they agree with you in a big meeting because they want to be polite, but they actually don't have any intention of doing what you're asking them to do. And I was like, that's exactly what's happening to me. Why didn't I know about that? And
What
so I
was it called
started,
again? Mickey Mouse what?
well, no. So the name of the company, it was the name of the company nod. So if the company's name
Oh,
was Mickey
sorry.
Mouse, it
Okay.
would be like the Mickey Mouse
Got
nod.
it. Okay, sorry.
I'm keeping things
Understood.
confidential to protect the innocent.
Got it.
And apparently it was a thing that everyone knew about. I didn't know about it because I was new. And then I started reaching out to some people who I, developed a relationship with the company and saying, tell me about this thing. Like, what do you do? How do you get around it? And they would say, oh, so what you have to do is you have to gain consensus before the meeting, so that when you show up to the meeting, you already have people that are on board and will back you up. And so when you're in that meeting and you're saying, oh, we should do this and this, then those people are like, oh yeah, I actually agree with Rachel. This would be a great idea. And here's why it's so important. And this is what we can do. And I'm planning on adopting it with my team. And then other people will get on board. But if you don't do that, you're kind of catching them off guard. And they're like, ooh, I don't necessarily want to do this. And they're going to be nice and polite, but there's actually no intention of ever carrying it out. And when I found out about that, I was like, oh, I wish I knew about that before. So what I did afterwards was I spent more time socializing things, bringing people along with me, helping them understand why it would benefit them. And then it was much more successful. So every company has a version of that, different nuances, and not everyone will tell you those things. And so when you go in and you're blind, you're going to bump into things. And so just like before you travel to a new country, I know before I travel to a new country, I do some research about what are the, what's the etiquette there? Do you tip? How do people react? Like, what are some really annoying things that they don't like when tourists do? Like, for example, if you're in France, when you go into a store, you need to say bonjour, right? Even if you don't speak French, you don't just go in and say, hey, how much does this cost? You actually have to say good morning or how are you or good afternoon. because otherwise you're considered rude. And I think we don't take the time to understand what those things are at the companies where we work, or to listen for the undertones of what else might be going on and then adjust and adapt our approach
Was
accordingly.
that beginning, middle, or recent in your career with the Mickey Mouse head nod?
You're trying to figure out which company it
No,
is.
I'm not. I just didn't know where,
Yeah.
where you were in your
It
maturity
was it was
process
in the
as
mi
a
it was
leader.
in the middle. It
Okay.
was in the middle. So I was senior enough to think that I knew how to navigate things. And I've
Yeah.
always been fearless, which means
Mhm.
sometimes I
You are
plow in
fearless. Yes.
and I have no idea what's going on. And sometimes, I have made faux pas in the past because of that. Now, I move on and I don't care because I don't need everyone to like me. And I'm always thinking I'm here for the greater good, but it has affected my ability to make an impact to be successful.
You said something interesting there. There are a lot of people that feel that need to be liked. And if
Yes.
you're a person that needs to be liked, corporate politics or whatever word you want to use, that's going to be hard to navigate. Because if you were trying to get people to like you versus be effective with you, you're done before you start. People need to figure that out. And that's why I asked what part of your career.
Yeah.
Like I told you my 2018 story. That was 20 years into my career. I still learn things now. Rachel watches me learn on the go.
Mm.
Every
Oh, I
part.
learned too.
Yeah,
Of
I know you
course.
do.
We all
We
do.
all do. But what separates us from a lot of people, Rachel, and to some of our listeners who I know are regulars, what separates y'all, I'm talking to you out there in podcast land, is the ability to see it and smell the room, smell the air, read the room, right? Like you have to do that with yourself too.
Yeah.
You don't know everything you think you know. Those are some hard lessons. And if you go back to the last podcast about imposter syndrome and being your authentic self and are you being real, you can't fake that. I tell people all the time, coworkers, I almost said employees, so don't read into my words, everybody. Coworkers and kids and horses, they can smell it.
Yeah.
If you're a quarter bit fake, they're going to know and they're going to nod at you just to move on with their day. So if you can find a way to be authentic while about yourself, not just with others, like be honest with yourself. You're good at this and you're bad at that. Okay, what do I got to focus on? It's like strength finders. We've talked about this before. Like, Marcus Buckingham, was that his name, Rachel? Remember him? Marcus
Hmm.
Buckingham, right? I mean, he said all of that in Trombone Player Wanted. Like, a lot of people focus on the bad, not their strengths. Double down more on strengths than your weaknesses, but don't hide from your weaknesses. Know that they're there. Like, I love his example of you're a parent and your kid brings home a report card, A, B, C, and D. Where do a majority of parents spend their time? On the
The
D.
CME. Mm-hmm.
And we're almost built for that. Why not give more math? Hey, you got an A in that for the 15th time in a row. What else could we be doing to keep reinforcing that instead of you're D on English? Well, maybe they're just not built for English. Like, you have to be the parent of yourself sometimes. You are the shepherd of yourself. It doesn't mean answer your own questions, like I said in the podcast before. Like, don't have a talk track with yourself because you're not going to tell yourself the truth. But being aware of it and seeking, I, I, s- I bare my soul to Rachel in ways that I probably shouldn't. I did it with Carrie
Same.
Martinelli. I did it with Benny Prada. I did it with Molly Werner. Like, they're ready-made Sherpas, but I don't mind looking small in their eyes if it's going to help me get big later. If that makes sense to everybody. Like, find your own Rachel. It doesn't have to be an HR person. They just happen to be
Hmm.
mine. I told you about Himanshu Patel. He's still a mentor of mine. Like, he's not HR. He's a CEO of a big company now. Like, if you have people in your life that will look at you and say, man, you're messing this up. Or, hey, I would avoid doing that in the future. Or, hey, do more of this. Stop looking at over here, Patrick. Look over here.
Yeah.
My God, you're so good at this part. Go, go, go. There's a version of politics, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Agree. And we're almost at time. So a couple of quick takeaways, because we always promise to leave you with some practical takeaways. Politics exists whether you like it or not. It's everywhere, but it's different everywhere you go because it's a different environment, different culture. Every team, every family, every country, every sports team, every church, every synagogue will have its own set of politics. Some of it you can say, I'm not playing. And that applies to don't involve yourself in the drama. Don't gossip. Don't be catty to people just because the cool kids say that you have to. Like, those are some things you could say, I am not engaging. I'm not involving myself in this level of politics. But the rest of it, the undertones, the rules of navigating that area, also don't expect to have to figure it out on your own. You can go to somebody, say you join a new company next week, and you reach out to your boss, you reach out to someone on the team and say, tell me what I need to know in order to be successful here. What are the unwritten rules? What are the things that have really tripped people up or gotten them in trouble? What are some of the secret, special, unsaid skill sets that it takes to be able to be successful? Ask them. Most of the time, they will tell you. And if you're a leader, if you're in HR, if you're an executive, don't wait for new people to have to ask. Please share, like publish them, right? It shouldn't have to be secret. We should be transparent about this, because if it's a phenomenon that's unhealthy, then we should try and get rid of it. But if it's just social expectations and norms that people have in this company, like socialize an idea before you catch people off guard at a meeting, like let people know, and then they'll have the tools to be successful.
I'm going to throw in, I know you said we're at time. Rachel thinks we talked too long, but I have a lot to say. So that Mickey Mouse nod thing that she talked about, I'd not heard that version before. If you're listening to this, don't follow the crowd and do that stuff. Like, what a horrible thing for Rachel to have to experience. Her idea was probably brilliant, because most of her ideas are. Even if it wasn't, say it. Like, don't group think with people. There's a version of politics. Oh, the politics says I just have to nod at her. No, don't do that. Be different. Don't buy into that stuff. Like, man, that's bad. I have something I call grin F. I'm not going to say the word. Like, that's another thing Himanshu taught.
Yeah.
Never heard of that until Himanshu said it. I'm like, what the?
Oh, is that? That was his term?
That was, yeah, he taught me that in that room that night, by the way. It's the first time I heard it.
Oh.
Don't do that to people. It's just a waste of time. And it takes more energy to do the Mickey Mouse nod than it does just to tell your version of the truth, and then to work on the problem together and to be open to ideas. So anyway, that's my takeaway. Don't Mickey Mouse nod.
That's more energy, but less courage. And so what I leave you with is have more courage and curiosity, because then you can figure out how to navigate the politics.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.